Here is the exact moment my whole life cracked open. And I want you to start there, because for 2 years it had been so quiet you could have missed it. My brother was standing in the middle of an apartment I had secretly been paying for, holding a glass of champagne, with 40 members of our family watching him like he was the sun. It was his engagement party. The good building downtown, the one with the doorman and the lobby that smells like money, the windows full of city lights. Brooke, his fiancée, was tucked under his arm in a dress that cost more than my monthly rent. Everyone was glowing. Tyler raised his glass and thanked the room for believing in him when he had nothing. He said he'd done it all himself. He said he was living proof that if you refuse to ask anyone for help, the world pays you back. People melted. My mother pressed a hand to her chest, and then my brother did the thing that ended it. He looked across the room, straight at me, and he smiled. He said that the only sad part of his perfect day was that his own sister couldn't find it in her heart to be happy for him. That some people are just too cold, that he forgave me anyway because that's the kind of man he'd become on his own. 40 heads turned. 40 people looked at me, the selfish daughter, the one who wouldn't even help her brother, standing alone by the window with a glass of wine I didn't want. My mother gave me a look I'd seen my whole life. The look that said, fix this, apologize, smooth it over, be useful. And for the first time in 31 years, I didn't. Instead, I reached into my bag. I took out my phone. My hands were steady, which surprised me. I opened the family group chat, the same one where, a week before, they had all agreed I was heartless, and I opened a folder I had been quietly building, and my thumb hovered over send. I looked up at my brother one last time, still smiling, still glowing, still telling the room how he'd built it all with his own 2 hands. He had no idea what was about to happen. He hadn't looked down yet. I pressed send, and one by one, around that beautiful room, 40 phones began to buzz to understand what was in that folder, and why a buzzing phone could do more damage than any shout. I have to take you back 2 years. Stay with me. It's worth it. My name is Maya. I'm 31 years old, and I have spent most of my life being the responsible one, which in my family is a polite way of saying the useful one. Let me explain the difference, because the whole story lives in it. I'm the older sister. I was the kid who did her homework without being told, got the scholarship, moved to the city, built a small, steady, unglamorous life. I work in logistics. I'm the person who sees the whole system at once and notices the one number that's quietly wrong before it becomes a disaster. I have a 1-bedroom I'm slowly buying a piece of, and a savings account I grew on purpose, $1 at a time, because nobody was ever going to grow it for me. Nothing about my life photographs well. And in my family, if it doesn't photograph well, it doesn't count. Here's the thing about being the responsible one. People stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as infrastructure. I was the one who showed up early and stayed late to clean up. I remembered the birthdays. I drove 4 hours when my father had his knee done. In the year my parents fell behind on their property taxes, I quietly paid the back balance and never mentioned it again. That same year, they threw Tyler a party for getting a new job. There was a cake with his name on it. The job lasted 4 months. Nobody ever threw a party for the tax bill that didn't bury the house, because nobody knew there was a bill at all. That's what being the floor is. The whole point of you is that no one has to think about you. Then there's my brother. Tyler is 27, and he is the favorite, and I say that the way you'd report the weather. He's genuinely charming, the funniest person at any table. He has never once been on time, finished what he started, or paid a bill before the second notice. And none of it has ever stuck to him. When Tyler fails, my parents call it bad luck. When I succeed, they call it luck. Like my whole life was a scratch ticket I happened to win. What I didn't understand back then is that being invisible has one strange power buried in it. Nobody watches the person they've decided is boring. Nobody checks the work of the daughter they trust to handle things. They just hand her the thing and look away. And 2 years before that party, my family handed me a thing and looked away, never realizing it was the one card that would decide everything. Here's how I ended up holding that card. 2 years before the toast, Tyler wanted to move into that downtown building with Brooke. The building ran his credit and turned him down flat, and it wasn't close. He'd financed a car he couldn't afford and let it get repossessed. He defaulted on a credit card, then another. On paper, my brother was exactly what he was, a risk. So my mother called me, and notice how she did it, because it's the whole family in one phone call. She didn't ask. She informed. Tyler needed a co-signer, she said, and really it was nothing. Just a name on a piece of paper, and Tyler would handle the actual payments, of course. And wasn't I lucky to be in a position to help my own brother get on his feet? Lucky, there's that word again. I should have said no right there. But I was 30, and I still had that old hope flickering in me, that this might finally be the thing that made them see me. So I drove out to the house, sat at the kitchen table. I'd done my homework out as a kid, and we made what my family solemnly called an understanding. My name would go on the lease as the leaseholder, because my credit was good. Tyler's name would go on as the occupant. Tyler would pay the rent. I was, in my mother's words, just insurance, a formality, a safety net no one expected to actually need. My father nodded like a man closing a wise deal. Brooke said thank you in a voice that already sounded bored. Tyler hugged me and told me I was the best sister in the world, that he'd never forget this. He was right about one thing. He never did forget it. He just remembered it backward. I signed the next week. Blue ink, my name, clean and careful, on a lease for an apartment I would never spend a single night in. For about 3 months, the understanding held. And then, very quietly, it didn't. The first text came in the spring. Tyler was a little short that month. Could I float the rent? Just this once, he'd pay me back Friday. I floated it. It was once. It was my little brother. Friday came. Friday went. The money did not. Then, it was the deposit on Brooke's new car, which somehow became my problem. Then, a work thing fell through, a job always about to start that never did. Then there was a stretch where he didn't even text a reason. The rent simply stopped appearing, and the silence around it grew its own permanence. Here's the trap I was in, and you need to see it clearly, because it's the hinge the whole story turns on. The lease was in my name. Not Tyler's. Mine. If the rent didn't get paid, it wasn't his credit that took the hit. It was mine. The credit I'd spent 10 years building, one careful payment at a time, the only inheritance I'd ever given myself. So I made a choice that felt small and turned out to be enormous. I set up an autopay from my own account. $2,400 on the first of every month, quietly pulled out of my checking and into a building I'd never lived in to protect a name that was the only thing nobody could take from me. Tyler never knew the autopay existed. As far as he was concerned, the rent just sort of happened. The way everything in his life always had. $2,400 a month. 2 years. Do that math when you have a quiet minute. It's not a small number. It has a shape in your life, an absence you can feel. It was the trip to see my college roommate that I postponed until she stopped inviting me. It was the certification course that would have moved me up a band at work. It was a savings account sitting smaller than it should be, like a plant in a room with no light. And the whole time, Tyler was posting that apartment like a trophy. The view at golden hour. Brooke and him clinking glasses on the balcony. My mother shared every photo and told the women at her church how far Tyler had come, all on his own, on his own. There was one night that stuck with me. I came home from a brutal week, too tired to cook, and ate cereal standing at my counter. I opened my phone and the first thing I saw was Tyler on that balcony, gold light behind him, a caption about how hard work always pays off. 200 likes. My mother's comment on top. So proud of you, son. And the notification right under it, in my banking app, was the rent. $2,400. Paid. To his address, I sat there with the cereal going soft and scrolled back through 2 years of my own photos, looking for one picture of my life that glowed like that. I didn't have one. I'd been so busy being the floor that I'd forgotten to stand on it myself. I closed the phone, I went to bed. And I told myself, like always, that it was temporary. It turns out a secret you carry quietly for 2 years becomes something else entirely when the people you carried it for decide to stand on top of it and call you worthless. Then came the wedding. Brooke wanted a big one. a vineyard, a live band, a guest list that grew every time I heard about it. And somewhere in the planning, a number got loose. $50,000. The gap between the wedding Brooke pictured and the one anyone in my family could actually pay for. In a normal family, a $50,000 gap is a sign to have a smaller wedding. In mine, it was a sign to call a meeting about me. I drove out to the house, same kitchen table, same blue afternoon light. And there, with my father nodding, and my mother holding my hand across the table, like she was about to give me a gift. They explained that they thought I should give Tyler $50,000 toward the wedding, not lend. Give. The reasoning was a small masterpiece. I made good money. I didn't have a wedding of my own coming. I didn't even have a partner, my mother added gently, as if that were a column in a budget with nothing in it. No kids, no real expenses, nobody depending on me. What was I even saving for? Family helps family. And after everything poor Tyler had been through, didn't he deserve one perfect day? I felt the whole room lean toward me, waiting for me to do what I always did. Smile. Sigh. Fold. Pay. And I thought about the auto pay that had left my account that very week, for the apartment where this perfect couple lived a life I was financing. I thought about the trip I never took, the course I never finished, the friend who stopped calling. And I said no. I didn't yell it. No speech, no list of grievances. I just said, quietly, that I wasn't going to give them $50,000, that I loved them, and the answer was no. The temperature in that kitchen dropped 20 degrees. I watched the warmth drain from my mother's face, watched her hand pull back from mine, watched myself stop being a daughter and become a problem in the space of one short word. I drove home strangely calm. I didn't know yet what I was going to do, but I knew what I wasn't going to do anymore. Retaliation started that same night, where my family does all its real business now. The group chat. 40 relatives. Aunts, cousins, my grandmother who reacts to everything with a thumbs up. My mother went first, so disappointed. She never imagined she'd raised a daughter this cold. My father kept his short. He hoped my money kept me warm at night. Brooke, who I'd met maybe 4 times, posted a breathless paragraph about how some people are simply incapable of love. And then Tyler typed that he didn't need my help, that he'd never needed my help, that everything he had, he'd built with his own 2 hands. And honestly, he felt sorry for me. His own 2 hands. I read that standing alone in my kitchen, in my own apartment, on the phone I bought myself. And I waited for the anger. It didn't come. What came instead was a deep stillness, because I finally understood the thing I'd been too hopeful to see for 31 years. They were never going to see me. Not because they couldn't, because seeing me would cost them the story they loved. So I put the phone face down. And then, for the first time, I picked it back up. Not to argue. Loud has never once won in my family. I picked it up to do 3 quiet things. First, I called the leasing office. I was the leaseholder, the legal one, the name on every page, and the lease was up for renewal in a few weeks. I told them, politely, that I would not renew, and that any new lease would need to be in the occupant's name alone. The woman pulled the file, went quiet, and told me that based on his credit, that was extremely unlikely to be approved. I thanked her. I meant it. Second, I opened my banking app and canceled the autopay. 24 months of quietly making my brother look successful, undone in one tap. I sat with how light it felt. Third, and this took the longest, I gathered the receipts. 2 years of rent payments, everyone stamped with Tyler's address. The text where he first asked me to float it, just once, he'd pay me Friday. The car deposit, a string of months with no reason at all. 2 years of evidence, organized the way I organize everything. Clear, calm, undeniable. The self-made man, itemized in one folder. I didn't send it. Not yet. That was the discipline of it. I just kept it ready, like an umbrella by the door, because Brooke had already texted the whole family the date of the engagement party at Tyler's apartment. In 2 weeks, I RSVP'd yes. I knew exactly where that folder was going to be opened. And I knew it wasn't going to make a sound louder than a phone on a table. So now you know what was in the folder. Let me take you back into that room. Tyler had just looked at me in front of 40 people and turned his big night into a small, smiling knife. The cold sister, the one who wouldn't help. He wanted them all to look at me, and they did. My mother's eyes said, "Fix this." Brooke wore the tiny, satisfied smile of a woman watching a rival get put in her place. For one long second, I felt the old reflex rise. Apologize, smooth it over, be useful, make the night nice again. My whole body knew that script, and then I let it go. All of it. 31 years of it. I reached into my bag and I took out my phone, and I'll tell you, my hands were steady. I opened the group chat, the one where they'd all agreed I was heartless a week before, and I sent the folder. 2 years of rent receipts, his address on every line, his own messages asking me to cover it again and again, and one line from me, the only thing I added, "I'm sorry I never mentioned it. I hope the day is still perfect." Then I slid the phone back into my bag, picked up my untouched wine, and waited. It started near the front, a single buzz on the table where the cake was. Then 2 more by the windows. Then a low, spreading hum as 40 phones lit up at almost the same time, the way they do when a message hits a big chat all at once. People glanced down out of habit. Then they stopped glancing and started reading. I watched it move through the room like weather. I watched my aunt's eyebrows climb. I watched a cousin's mouth fall open and his eyes come up to find me, then slide to Tyler, then back down. I watched my grandmother squint at her screen and hold it out at arm's length. The applause from the toast was still dying in the air, and underneath it now was this other sound, the soft, awful rustle of 40 people reading the same thing in the same 30 seconds. The chat itself started to move while I stood there. I didn't have to look, I could hear it in the buzzing, the second wave. The replies stacking up. Someone typed a single question mark. Someone else, one of the aunts, wrote, "Maya, is this real?" A cousin started forwarding the screenshots to whoever wasn't in the room yet, because that's what families do. They spread the thing faster than anyone can stop it. 2 years of payments, his address, his own words, multiplying across phones, out of the party, out into the whole extended family, somewhere I could never have reached with a speech, and could never take back now, even if I wanted to. I didn't want to. And Tyler kept smiling. That's the part I'll never forget. He was still writing the toast, still glowing, glass in the air, basking. He hadn't looked down yet. He had no idea the floor he'd just bragged about building had a name on it. And the name wasn't his. My mother looked at her phone. I watched her face do something I had never once seen it do in 31 years. It stopped performing. The disappointment, the warmth she handed out, and pulled back like a leash. All of it just fell off, and underneath was a woman doing math she didn't want to do. 2 years of rent to that address. Paid by the daughter she'd called cold an hour ago. She set her champagne down on the table very slowly, like the glass had gotten heavy. She didn't pick it back up. Brooke's little smile went last. She leaned over Tyler's shoulder, read his screen, then looked up at the apartment around her. The view, the balcony, the lobby that smells like money, like she was seeing it for the first time. Like she was recalculating in real time who exactly she was about to marry and what exactly he had actually built. It got very quiet. Not a gasp, not a scene, quieter than that. The specific silence of a room full of people who have just learned that the story they were clapping for was paid for by the person they came here ready to pity. Tyler finally felt it. You always feel a room turn before you understand why. The smile flickered. He lowered the glass an inch. He looked around for the applause that had been there a second ago, and it was gone. 40 faces were looking down at their phones instead of up at him. "What?" he said, to no one. "What is it?" Nobody answered him. In that family, somebody always rushed to smooth the silence. Not this time. 40 people just kept reading. He looked at his own phone last of all. I watched him scroll. I watched him reach the date on the first payment, and the next, and the next, 2 years of them, and I watched the exact moment the math arrived. The moment he understood that every photo he'd ever posted on that balcony had been standing on his sister's bank account. His face didn't get angry. It got young. For 1 second, he looked like the little boy I used to cover for, caught in a thing too big for the smile to fix. I didn't say a word. I'd already said the only line I needed, and it was sitting in everyone's hand. I just set my wine down on the windowsill, picked up my coat, and walked toward the door of the apartment I had paid for and never once slept in. The last thing I heard behind me was my brother saying my name. Not the way he said it at the toast. Smaller. The way you say a name when you finally need something and realize you've just burned the one person who always provided it. I didn't turn around. I'd been turning around my whole life. This time I just left. Here's how it landed, in case you need it to land clean. It did. The phone calls came that night and didn't stop for days. My mother first, her voice small and careful now, a voice recalculating in real time. She wanted to know why I hadn't told them. Sit with how strange that question is, as if my crime were the silence, not the years they'd spent taking. As if I'd wronged them by letting them believe a flattering story too long. I told her the only true thing I had left, the one thing they couldn't reframe, that I hadn't told them because I'd wanted, just once in my life, to be loved without an invoice attached. And then I said the sentence I'd been swallowing for 31 years. That I was done being the family's quiet bank, that I loved them, and that I was stepping back. And this time I meant it all the way down. The wedding got a great deal smaller. The vineyard became a backyard. The band became a playlist. Brooke was furious, mostly at me, which I found I could live with comfortably. Tyler and Brooke moved out of the building they could never actually afford, and into a place that fit the income my brother truly had. A very different address than the one in all those golden hour photos. The self-made posts quietly disappeared. You can't repost a balcony you don't live on anymore. A few days after the party, one of my cousins messaged me privately, just to me. She said she'd always wondered how Tyler afforded that place, that it never quite added up, and that she was sorry, because she'd watched me get treated like the family wallet for years and never said a word. She didn't want to be the kind of person who only notices the floor once it's gone. It wasn't much. But it was the first time in my life someone in that family looked at what I carried and simply said, "I see it." I cried in my kitchen over 4 sentences from a cousin I barely talked to. That's how starved I'd been for it. My parents and I aren't estranged, exactly. But the old machine is broken, the one where I arrive, absorb the cost, and smile. I answer when they call. I send a card on the birthdays. I do not send money. And the strangest thing happened when I stopped. Slowly, awkwardly, like people learning a new language, they started treating me like a person instead of a fixture. It isn't warmth, not yet. But it's real. Real is more than I had in 3 decades of being useful. As for the $2,400 a month, I was no longer pouring into someone else's view. I took it, and the savings that finally had room to breathe, and I put a down payment on a place of my own, a real one, mine. My name on a lease, for once, holding up my own life instead of someone else's. I think about that party sometimes. My brother with his glass raised, telling 40 people he'd built it all from nothing, the only sad part being the cold sister by the window. He wasn't entirely wrong, you know. Somebody in that room had built a life quietly, without help, without applause, holding up far more than anyone realized. It just wasn't him. They never once thought to check whose name was on the lease. Until the night I let them all find out at the same time. If you'd have pressed send in that room too, or if you think she should have walked out without a word, tell me in the comments. And if you've ever been the family's quiet bank, the responsible one, no one thinks to thank, you already know exactly how this feels. Subscribe for more stories about the people everyone underestimated, right up until the day they stopped paying.